Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Boss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is December 18th at about 5 a.m. I've been having a lot of problems with my sound system. I'm sorry. I know there is an echo, but this is the best I can get it at the moment. I've been working on it all week. And I've been working on a video that I wanted to present to you about Sandy Hook, about gun control, about the promises that have been made to us and what the reality is that we have received and have been receiving for many, many years. Now, without further ado, if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, I thank you very much for watching this, and I thank you for forgiving me about the sound quality. I want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And of course, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear your voice, to get your tweets, your chats, your phone calls from anywhere in the world, and to share in your voice because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to be able to have free speech. And we hope that you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to share your voice with us. All right, folks. So this is what I was working on besides the sound system. Is I wanted to look over the promises that were made at the time of Sandy Hook. 10 years ago, we were told after the Sandy Hook massacre, the nation was in an uproar. Many people were very concerned about school shootings and mass shootings and gun violence as well. And people were saying, do something. We were asking our politicians, do something. And they decided that they were going to respond. And they did a lot of things. But the question is, was any of it effective? Did the promise of the government saying they will make you safe, that they will make your kids safe, that they will make schools safe, has that actually worked? I mean, not just what do I think, but what does the data tell us? What do we see empirically about this? Because it's not about our feelings. It's about what's the reality. We were promised a lot of things that our feelings would be. And what we received as a result was something very different. We received, as an example, from New York State, we were told that body armor was illegal, that you can't have body armor anymore. This is a result of what happened with Sandy Hook. The government said that would be dangerous. Passive self-defense would be dangerous. And so they made that illegal. In fact, that was made illegal on June 6th of 2022. And this is part of a package of laws that were supposed to strengthen gun laws and protect New Yorkers. Now, I have to ask you, how does not having body armor, not being able to go and protect yourself passively, how is that going to make you safe? Well, let's think of something else. We have H.R. 8361, which is being offered by Representative Jayapal out of Washington. And she's trying to pass a bill that will take away your ability to be able to ever defend yourself. That's it. You're going to give up your Second Amendment rights essentially forever, and you're going to be protected from gun violence that way, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And we covered this in depth, and I do recommend you look at that video to see more about it. But we've also been told that we have to be protected from gun trafficking. It's a big deal. And this is a bill, you may recall it, it's H.R. 7910, the Protecting Our Kids Act, which was introduced by Representative Jerry Nadler, May 31st of 2022. And this bill raised the age of people being able to have firearms. Mind you, it's already, in virtually every state, it already is 18 or 21, unless you're going hunting. But this would make it so that even if you were hunting, you wouldn't be able to own a firearm, which doesn't matter because we have seen in case after case after case, it's not a question of the age of the person, but rather the mentality. Because we've seen kids build their own bombs. Remember the Islamberg bomb threat That had nothing to do with firearms. They were making bombs. These were kids in New York State. But they told us that one of the biggest things is to prevent gun trafficking. That's the real reason why we're seeing so much violence. That this is causing mass shootings, school shootings, and gun violence overall. That we have to prevent gun trafficking, except one of the biggest gun traffickers in the world is the ATF, which we remember from Operation Fast and Furious. You may have forgotten about that. That was the Obama administration, that they were actually giving guns and selling guns to gangs around Mexico and theoretically around the world. And those guns, which they lost track of almost immediately, came back into the United States and was used against our border agents and killed border agents as well as American citizens. So gun trafficking, when it comes from the United States government, well, that's an oops, I'm sorry, but they're part of the problem. In fact, we've heard from many politicians like Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, someone who absolutely hates the Second Amendment. Look at our coverage of H.R. 127 to just see what we're talking about here. But Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, she was adamant that it's okay for gun trafficking that will endanger American lives by Victor Bout, but it's bad when it's happening in America, when it's happening by the American government. But Victor Bout, it was okay because we got an entertainer. These are the words of Representative Sheila Jackson Lee when she was speaking to Joy Reid about this.
The 25 years, he served 11 to 16 years. I can't remember the exact number.
She's talking about Victor Bout, the world's largest or most effective gun trafficker, illegal gun trafficker in the world. Victor Bout. He was arrested on terrorism and attempts to kill American citizens, selling guns around the world. He is the warlord that was featured as a movie in the Nicolas Cage movie Lord of War. To give you an idea of the kind of atrocities that he has enabled around the world. And he was arrested by America to serve a 25-year sentence, and he was released and now is let loose on the world because of getting the entertainer, Brittany Griner. And that means world peace is in danger. And her answer here.
But in actuality, his weapons might have been used to kill Americans. He has not killed Americans. I'm not saying he's not a nasty, bad guy, but I will tell you that I believe that Americans should know that the sovereignty of their nation will always be behind them and they'll never be forgotten.
I don't know about you, but it sounded to me like she just said, guns don't kill people, people kill people.
That's exactly what she said. And that's exactly the message that she put out there. And remember, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee just excused gun trafficking, the very same thing that Jerry Nadler told us he wants to prevent. That this was one of the biggest threats. That this is why we had to pass his law, the H.R. 7910, because of gun trafficking. But yet, those very same Democrats are more than happy to allow the world's largest gun trafficker to be released. The guns did it. He didn't kill people, the guns kill people. Well, isn't that what people on the right, isn't that what everyone who owns a firearm says? It's the bad guy that we have to be worried about, not the gun trafficking. The Democrats seem to be very confused. And yes, gun trafficking is bad. And yes, we should stop gun trafficking, especially when the gun trafficking is being done by the Lord of War or when it's being done by the United States government. But Democrats don't seem to share that same concern. And that should be very troubling to most people. Now, what does that mean in retrospect when we think about the 10 years of Sandy Hook? How many people have died in school shootings in the last 10 years? This is coming from the BBC. So it's not just what I'm guessing. It's not a right-wing newspaper. It's the BBC. And what we see that the BBC, in looking at the K-12 school shooting database research group, which is said to be independent, there have been 189 shootings at schools and around schools since over the last 10 years. So roughly about 19 shootings per year. 19. Not hundreds, not thousands, 19. And you may say, well, Mike, that's a lot of shootings. And I would say, yeah, that is. Any amount is more than we want at our schools. But let's make sure that they're talking about suicides, domestic violence. They're talking about gang violence. In fact, I will show you the report itself so that you can see that they're putting everything in the kitchen sink to make this statement. It's not 19 school shootings. It's not 19 mass shootings. So we have to understand, when we look at Sandy Hook, when we look at what they said they're going to protect us from, what is the actual danger? What is fear-mongering and what's the reality? There were 17 active shooter situations in the last decade. That means 1.7 per year, about 2 per year. Not 189, not 19 each year, 1.7, or in other words, rounding up 2 per year. In total, from those 17, there were 279 deaths from being shot on school property during, before, or after school hours, including weekends. So again, we're not talking about school shootings. We're talking about 2 shootings a year, 28 people being shot, but that includes suicide, that includes gangs, people being mugged, domestic violence on the weekend, after school hours. So what are we really looking at here? When we think about Sandy Hook and we think about the 10 years since Sandy Hook, what's the reality? What have we really dealt with, and what are we trying to fix? We're trying to lower school shootings. Well, there's only about 2 per year on average. Some years a little less, some years a little bit more. On average, about 2 per year. And we do see that there are deaths because of that, which is horrible, always. And I understand we have things like Uvalde that stick in our minds. Sandy Hook sticks in our mind. Columbine sticks in our mind. Those are exceptions, and those are outside what we normally see. Now, this is important, I think, because this was being brought up recently by a YouGov poll. And the YouGov poll wanted to put an impression of fear in your mind because we have laws like 8361, the suicide prevention bill, which is being offered by Representative Jayapal. Mind you, why do we need that if red flag laws, which were already suggested to us in the 10-year gap, we were told, well, that would solve the suicides. That would bring down suicides by guns. It didn't work. So in the YouGov poll, which I did capture here, and I want to show it to you. This was taken on December 15th. It came out on December 14th. And these are the results as of December 15th. Now, they were asking people in the poll, do you remember the shooting on December 14th? And then they asked people, do you remember where you were when you heard about this? Why would you ask that in a poll? Because they're trying to instill doubt. You don't remember the actual facts. They go on to say in this, that thinking about this, did you expect any changes to gun ownership laws, to gun laws in the United States after Sandy Hook? And 40% of the people who took the poll said they did not expect anything to change. The gun laws should not have changed because of Sandy Hook. 38% expected some change, 21% expected a lot of change. Okay, so let's think about this. So roughly 59% expected that something was going to change about gun laws. The question I would ask before you go any further, what should change? What should change because of Sandy Hook? What law could you pass that would make someone who is crazed and deranged, demonic, what would make them suddenly not commit the crime that they did? How can you legislate crazy or evil? That's an important thing to keep in mind. But let's go on. They say in the poll, Are you for or against strict gun ownership laws? Are you in favor of strict gun control? 54% of Americans say they are, or the people who took the poll. 45% said they were against it. And yet, 165 million people, roughly half of America, owns firearms. Roughly 99.994% of all gun owners in America are law-abiding citizens that threaten no one. And those 165 million gun owners own 2.5 guns each. So how much of a problem are school shootings in the United States today? 58% of the people taking this poll, a YouGov poll, a popular online poll, say that school shootings are a problem. Except, again, I want to refer back to there are 17 in 10 years. Even one is maybe too much, but let's think of the reality. There were 1.7 per year. It's not a problem that's growing. It's not a problem that disappeared. It stayed essentially the same. Now, how much of an impact do strict gun control laws have on preventing school shootings? Here's the big question. In the last 10 years, we have seen the SAFE Act, we've seen red flag laws, we have seen the New York State reverse the Supreme Court decision. We have seen people try to pass things like Jerry Nadler's bill, 7910. We've seen Representative Jayapal with 8361. We've seen New York State make bulletproof vests illegal. How much of an impact has any of this had? 47% can tell you that it had no impact whatsoever. 31% said it was a big impact, and 21% said it had somewhat of an impact. Again, the numbers didn't change. 17 school shootings over 10 years, 1.7 per year, roughly the same amount every year. It hasn't changed. So how much of an impact would expanding mental health services have on preventing school shootings? Would it be helpful to address the mental issues that some crazy people are doing, which laws have no impact on? Laws have no impact on the crazed. 50% said somewhat of an impact. 36% think it would have a big impact. Compared to 10 years ago, do you think school shootings are more or less likely to occur? 63% said they're more likely to occur. Why? What has changed to make it more likely? We have more gun control laws today than we had 10 years ago. We have more things like the red flag laws in more states. Democrats have been asking for even more things to raise the age limit, even though it's already well above 18 for most states. We've seen them say that you have to give up your rights to the Second Amendment, that they can automatically come in and take your rights with red flag laws. What else do you need? So that's an interesting question. Why are they going to be more likely? What's making people go out and... There's the core question. Why do people decide the only option they have is to go to a school and to harm innocent children? If we can answer that question, we could actually stop school shootings, which are a subset of mass shootings. And I think very likely if we can get to why someone would go to a school and shoot innocent children, we can and maybe also understand why would someone go to a public place, shoot innocent civilians. This is a key question we have been asking for years. Of the 17 years we've been doing political commentary, this is one of our core questions. If we can answer this, we can resolve it. People say it's increasing. Why? The news media coverage has increased. The actual action, not so much. What one thing would be the most effective in reducing or stopping school shootings? Would education? Not really. More spending on mental health? Maybe that. More security at schools? That could stop it in action, but it wouldn't stop them from happening. Reforming gun laws? They've been doing that for 10 years. That's not effective. Arming teachers and staff could minimize, again, like more security, that minimizes how long the incidents go on. It minimizes the number of victims, but it doesn't stop it. None of these will actually stop shootings except maybe mental health. Seriously and realistically, let's think about this. Because we have to understand this clearly. Is more gun control helping anyone? Are you actually safer? Is it changing the numbers? And the real answer over the last decade has been very clear. No, it isn't. What we do know is that American citizens being armed actually protects at least as many lives as are endangered by criminals and by mass shooters. And don't take my word on that. Let's look at some of the data. Looking at a 2013 study on the behalf of the White House, the Obama administration, January 16th, 2013, President Barack Obama wanted to address firearm violence, and he had a study done. Defensive use of guns. On average, 500,000 people use a firearm to protect themselves. The number may be as high as 3 million. Some, depending on the source, would say it's as low as 100,000, averaging about 500,000 times a year. People protect themselves and others with firearms. That's a huge thing. And when I say that, I want you to understand we're talking about cases like this one. You may recall it. This was a pregnant woman, reported by NBC News, November 4th, 2019. A pregnant woman had to use an AR-15 to protect herself and her family. Her husband was being pistol whipped. Her daughter was in danger. She was 8 months pregnant, and she had to defend her family. And she did so successfully. We're talking about situations like the armed hero who stopped a mass shooting in the Indiana Mall. That happened July 19th of this year. So being the defensive uses of guns, we do see that. It happens. You've heard about it at churches in Texas. You've heard about it at synagogues. You've heard about this happening in many places around the country. It just doesn't get a lot of news. That seems to be one of the most effective things because the gun laws aren't stopping criminals. As much as you are being told it's out of hand, that it's going crazy, I want you to understand it's relatively not that bad. And when I say that, let me explain what I mean. If we're looking at the data, and this is coming from the CDC, looking at 1999 to 2020, looking at the number of deaths and roughly the percentage of deaths due to firearms. These are homicide firearm deaths. So we're talking about gangs, and we're talking about mass shootings, school shootings. We're talking about domestic uses for all races, both sexes, throughout the United States. And what is the rate? Well, in 1999, when there was 279 million Americans, it was about 3.8, or 10,828. In 2020, that number was up to 19,384. But the population grew by 50 million. So in 2020, that was the year that we had the riots with Antifa and BLM. That was the year that we had autonomous zones where they killed children in Portland, in Atlanta, where we saw mothers like in Indianapolis that were killed for saying all lives matter. Crazy time, one of the worst, almost the peak, only to be exceeded by 2021, and that was 5.8. That's homicides. That's people in all of these burning down buildings, shooting up, taking over areas of the United States, through all the rioting, all the violence, 5.8. And throughout the rest of the time, we were relatively, in 2019, there were 14,414 homicides with 328 million. Again, about 50 million more people, and it was only 4.39. Now, why is that important? Because we have to burst the bubble that there's some kind of crazy increase that's happening, that there's rampant violence going on everywhere, and that you're more in danger today than you've been before. That's not really true. We have criminals, of course, and we have the deranged individuals, and they are out there, and they are a problem. But in general, we've seen that this is consistent. If you take out the explosion of 2020 and 2021, we're relatively at the same levels. It's also important to understand that when we say there's 17 incidents over the last 10 years, about 2 schools or 1.7 schools per year, you have to also understand there are about 130,000 schools in America. 98,000 public schools, 13,000 middle schools, 2,500 junior high schools, 23,900 high schools in America in 2022. Is that too many? Absolutely. But there's 2 a year. That's it. Out of 130,000 schools. That percentage is insanely low. Is that because of gun control? No. Because again, if we're thinking about gun control, did gun control make you safe? No, it didn't. Think of all the gun control that you have seen, all the different laws, the cosmetic law saying, oh, you can't have a magazine with more than 7 bullets. You can't have a magazine a firearm that looks a certain way. The red flag laws, all the individual state laws that have been passed, the bans on certain types of firearms. None of that has worked. None of it has worked. We can see that from the data. Yes, the numbers have been relatively the same. They haven't increased relative to the population growth, but it hasn't stopped either. They haven't made you safe. They haven't made schools safe or protected you from mass shootings in any place in America. And I think that's important to mention, because when you start looking at the data and understanding that they're not making you safe, the promise is never being fulfilled, you aren't being helped, then you have to start asking the question, well, what is happening? Let me explain when I say they're exaggerating this and they're putting fear into you. You've heard over and over again that America is one of the most violent places in the world, that because Americans own guns, it's deadly, that this is dangerous for you and me. It's not true. Countries with the highest rates of violent gun deaths, homicides, El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, Brazil, Bahamas, Honduras, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. Yes, there is. We have 37,000 gun deaths. That's true. But that's because 63% of those deaths were because of suicide. Once you take out for suicides, the numbers drop. And we're not in the top 10. We're not the most deadly place. See, they conflate these numbers to make it sound like, oh my God, we have all these people who are dying. It's because there's people running everywhere with guns. No, it's because the news media is pushing for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, telling you, oh my God, this person shot someone, or they shot many people. But that's not normally what happens. That's not where most of the deaths are coming from. And they avoid talking about things like the gang violence that we see in Illinois, in LA, in New York, in many states around, in many cities around this country, where the biggest problem tends to come from. And this isn't a new thing. We've seen this before. In fact, you can go and use the Wayback Machine to see our old site that we had. We lost it this year because of money, but looking at our Voss Political, in 2017, we did a deep dive into mass shootings. And we found, when we looked at the data, when we actually looked at what was going on, our guns, this is after the New York SAFE Act, and copycats around the nation, this is after red flag laws were instituted in a dozen states. Did they make people more safe? Did they stop any of the firearm uses? In 2014, in 2015, 2016, in the years immediately after Sandy Hook, were you safe? The answer is no. And in fact, the data tells us that over 30 years, we tend to see 20 mass shootings a year, about 100 people died a year. That number hasn't really changed. It's been consistent. Some years a little more, some years a little bit less. And we see the news media emphasize every single one, absolutely. And again, we're not seeing any of the politicians actually live up to the promise they've made, that you're going to be safe. And that's the important takeaway at every time. I'm repeating it because it's important to remember. They promised you that they would pass this law and you would be safe, and you're not. They said they would pass this law and that would stop mass shootings, they would stop gun violence, and it didn't. Not once. But you became less free, and the government became more powerful every single time. When we look at some of the data out there, like most recently on October 7th of 2022, firearm homicide rates increased 35% because of from 2019 to 2020. Why did that happen? Because of the riots, because of Antifa, BLM, the autonomous zones. An estimated almost 21,000 homicides with firearms and 26,000 firearm suicides happened in 2021. This is a result of the lockdowns, people not being able to go to work, businesses closing forever because of the riots that we saw across this country and of the autonomous zones that continued into 2021. But you haven't been made safer. Looking at from 2002 to 2021, with all the gun laws that were being passed, with all the things they promised you after Sandy Hook, you weren't any safer. Look at the chart. You can look at different states. Let's look at New York State, one of the largest gun control states in the nation, the most anti-Second Amendment, one of the most anti-Second Amendment states in the nation. Looking at the Gun-Involved Violence Elimination, or GIVE report that comes out twice a year. This is from November 14th, 2022. And looking at this, looking at the shooting incidents, shooting victims, and individuals killed over the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2021, we have seen that gun violence has been either the same or higher almost every single year. All the laws that they passed, all of the gun control that was suggested either by the disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo, Kathy Hochul, whether it's Obama or Biden, none of it worked. None of it worked. It didn't make you safe. It has never made you safe. And as a result, it never made your schools safe. When we look at that, remember it was the K-12 school shooting database that was quoted by the BBC that you've heard quoted over the last couple of days. Their data includes gang shootings, domestic violence, shooting at sporting games, after-hours school events, suicides, fights that escalated into shootings and accidents. It also included weekends for their data. So they threw everything into this together to make you scared. This is going back to the 1970s. And there have been school shootings since the 1970s. In fact, the first mass shooting happened in 1948 in New Jersey, I believe right outside of Camden. It was an individual PTSD. And then around 2018 and beyond, we saw that increase. And about 2018 is when we started seeing all of the division in America, the demonizing of people based on their activities. But let's think about not just every type of shooting that could possibly occur, not just someone being mugged in a school parking lot over the weekend. Let's think about what about mass shootings? And again, school shootings are a subset of mass shootings. So how many mass shootings have been happening? Well, between 1982 and 2022, 40 years, there haven't been that many. 23 in California. Over 40 years, there have been 23 in California. One of the states with the most gun laws in the entire nation, with some of the most restrictive gun laws in the nation. And they lead the nation in mass shootings in the subset school shootings. New York State is another one with one of the higher numbers. They had 5 in 40 years. This includes school shootings. Also looking at Illinois, which includes Chicago. Chicago, which leads the nation pretty much every year in shootings, they only had 5 5 mass shootings, which includes school shootings. I want to understand how incredibly rare this is. Over 40 years, it is incredibly rare for a mass shooting to take place. And it is even more rare for that shooting to take place at a school. You have always been safe. Whether or not any laws were passed, you have always been relatively safe. Your kids have always been relatively safe for decades. The government became more powerful, and certain political ideologies became more powerful. And I know they love to tell you things like California's gun safety policies save lives. Yeah, those same gun policies that have led in the number of mass shootings in the nation. Think of the San Bernardino shooting, which was a mass shooting, religious-based mass shooting. And all of the gun laws in California didn't stop stop any of the shooters, nor did it make anyone safe. You can say that it might have made people less safe because all the civilians weren't able to be armed to actually protect themselves. And quite honestly, looking at Chicago with every single gun law that they ever had, if you look back to 1964, all the way to today, nothing has pretty much changed them. Chicago is still one of the most violent places on the face of the earth. In fact, if you looked at 2021, according to NBC, talking NBC Channel 5 out of Chicago, 2021 ended with 797 homicides. That's 25 more than in 2022, and 200, almost 300 more than in 2019. There were 3,561 shooting incidents, 300 more than in 2021, 1,415 more than in 2019. With all of the gun laws, with all of the restrictions, with even more laws being promoted and all the individual state laws that have been passed, you haven't been made safe. Sandy Hook did not lead to you becoming safer, nor did it make you overall more violent, other than 2020 and 2021, where we had BLM riots across this nation, where we had autonomous zones across this nation, where children were killed because of those autonomous zones in Atlanta, in Portland, where individuals were targeted in Seattle and killed by members of Antifa. And that's just the data over and over again. Now, what's the whole point of this? I want you to understand and differentiate between the emotion and the result. Gun laws have not been effective. They have not changed the trend. They have not changed the numbers. They have not made you safer. They also haven't made you more in danger overall, maybe a little bit. When you can't defend yourself with a bulletproof vest, when you can't be armed, when women can't go out and get a concealed carry to protect themselves from a man who's maybe 6, 7, 8 inches, maybe a foot taller than she is, maybe weighs 50, 70, maybe 100 pounds heavier than she is, and you can't get an force multiplier, something to equalize that, well, that should concern you. But the reality is, they're not making you safe. They have never made you safe. And they know they're not making you safe, which is why there is not one politician in America who believes in gun control that can actually quote a single study anywhere in America that actually conclusively shows that the gun control laws lowered crime. They can't even show you a gun control law that lowered suicide rates. I've talked to the state of Connecticut, and they've had red flag laws since 1999. They were supposed to stop or slow down or minimize the number of suicides with those red flag laws. Not 1 year has that ever happened. Not one study has shown that red flag laws have helped people with suicides. And when we look at just gun violence overall, as I've shown you the numbers now, it hasn't helped. We are focused on the wrong thing. Gun control will not make you safe. The laws that we are enacting to take away your Second Amendment rights will not make you safe. They have never made you safe. What can make you safe is Perhaps looking at mental health and the causes, the root elements that cause mass shootings and school shootings as a subset, and more importantly, gun violence overall. What that caused. Let's address that issue. We hear the same thing coming out of Democrats and progressives. Do more of the same. They will do something. They will do what they did before. And you will be safe, is the promise. And you never will be, because you never have been. Maybe you disagree. And I would love to see the data that you can show that would refute what I have said. I would love to be able to speak to these politicians, Kathy Hochul, to Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer, any of these advocates for gun control, and go through the data with them. And I would love to have this conversation with them, but they never want to speak about this. They always run away. They always hide from the truth. Do you believe that there's any gun control law that they could pass that will make you safe, that will make you safe from mass shootings, to make your kids safe from school shootings? Is there any law they could possibly pass that would do that? They want you to go with the emotion and just obey. I'm asking you to think. I'm asking you question, is this effective? And if it isn't, why are we doing it? I look forward to hearing to what you have to say. I again apologize. I know there is an echo. We're working on it, and I'll try and fix that for the Sunday live stream. But I thank you for watching the video and putting up with the sound until we can get it fixed. And I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. I know you've heard it before. What difference does it? You make the difference. When you watch, chat, tweets, your likes and shares and your subscription, you make the difference. From across the world, you help us to keep the lights on and the stream alive. You are making the difference to fight the woke and the crazy legislation that we see before. We at No Soundbites Allowed, and I want to thank you for everything that you do in helping us reach our goal, and your likes, your tweets, your comments, and your subscriptions to the channel. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And this is a special thank you to those who have donated to the channel and helped us in all of our efforts. We will strive to make this channel the best that we possibly can, because you deserve no less. Thank you.